What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be taking a trip through haunted Disneyland. Welcome to day 4 of the 7 days of Halloween as we take a little trip into the haunted world of Disneyland. Now, I am still very sick, but pushing through for you guys, and I know this isn't technically day 4, but this is how I wrote the scripts. Thank you guys so much for your patience, and yeah, I'm still not well. I've personally never visited Disneyland in California, but Disney World in Orlando, Florida is one of my most favoriteest places to visit in the entire world so far, and I've been there many times. I just love how happy everything feels and how exciting everything seems to be. The energy of this particular place is off the charts positive, but I'll admit I saw some pretty strange stuff in my visits there, and a lot of it did have to do with the paranormal. Maybe I'll talk about that someday and perhaps take you all on a trip through haunted Disney World. But for now, I want to focus on Disneyland as there's far more information on just how supernaturally creepy it is than its much larger counterpart. It's crazy because to most people outside of this community, I'm sure there's almost no place else that they could think of that would be less haunted or less well known for paranormal and supernatural phenomenon to be happening. But that's why this is going to be so much fun. I've really been looking forward to doing this particular video, and I can't wait to hear some of your reactions in the comments. Please, if you've had your own experiences at any theme parks at all, including Disneyland or Disney World, as well as any experiences at all, anywhere at all, email me, and all of that information is something you can find at the end of this video and in the description box. With that being said, let's jump right in. Disneyland was originally opened in Anaheim, California on July 17th, 1955, and it's one of 2 original theme parks that were a part of Disneyland Resorts. It's also the only one of the many Disney-themed theme parks that have opened up around the world since then that was overseen completely by Walt Disney himself. Disneyland, in my opinion, is more like a small city more than a theme park, and when you're there, it's like the outside world no longer exists. It now has more than 20,000 employees working in the park, and it has many different types of rides, attractions, shops, restaurants, and shows, plus so much more. It really is one of a kind experience, at least for me, and as soon as I'm financially able to, I'll be picking up my stepdad's tradition of going to Disney World every single year for 10 days because we did that for so long, and I miss it so much now. But anyway, Disneyland parks have the largest guest attendance over any other theme park in the entire world, and it seems as though the popularity of it never dimmed since its inception in the mid-50s. Most people wouldn't ever think about anything other than happiness, wonder, amazement while inside the parks, and that would be normal for most people, but let's be real. This is the Gemma Jade channel, this is the paranormal community, and I know I've had more than my fair share of strange occurrences while visiting Disney World myself. Again, I've only been to Disney World in Florida, but I would imagine it's not too different from the original. However, the original obviously has a lot more history than any of the others, and that's one of the reasons I decided to specifically cover this one here today. Disneyland is actually one of the most haunted places in Southern California, so let's take a look at how this could ever be the case for a place that's so often referred to as, quote, the happiest place on earth, end quote. I wanted to start with the attraction called the Haunted Mansion because, well, it seems obvious that there would be something sinister happening there, at least below the surface. Most haunted houses in general tend to have paranormal activity within or surrounding them, and that's just because of the overall energy that goes into creating such places. But this is altogether something different. So this ride was first brought to the drawing board in the early 1950s when a man who was an animator but then became an Imagineer, whose name was Ken Anderson, dreamed it up. An animator is someone who would do the Disney cartoons, and an Imagineer is someone, I suppose, who dreams up the rides and attractions at these Disney-themed parks. When Ken Anderson began pitching his idea to Walt Disney, it entailed a haunted house attraction that could be walked through by the guests and visitors, and this whole thing was based on an idea Ken had gotten while looking at a cartoon for the Headless Horseman somehow. As most ideas do, this one evolved a bit, and it ended up where guests wouldn't walk through but ride on a buggy throughout the tour as all types of creepy and somewhat scary ghouls, ghosts, and goblins would run around and sometimes jump out at them. The ride was officially opened in 1969, and it all ended up in a gorgeous and haunting graveyard scene. The Haunted Mansion's reputation for being haunted outside of the fake ghouls and creepies roaming around actually can be traced back to when the ride was still under construction and hadn't even been fully built or opened yet. In the early 1960s, one of the sound designers was working in the so-called seance room, and he suddenly heard what he first thought was a radio. However, upon further inspection, he realized it was random music coming from the walls themselves. It was inexplicable and unexplainable, but he would continue to hear this haunting music for the next several days before finally realizing there literally couldn't have been anywhere that it was coming from. It was disembodied music, so to speak. Instead of getting scared and running off, what he did was, in my opinion, quite genius, as he set up a very large speaker so that the ethereal music would blast through the entire construction site. There's also some staff that claimed that the original spell book used in the Haunted Mansion in the seance room was a real witch's spell book. And I think that back then that would have been some sort of really big deal, where today, again, at least in this community, not so much. Unless you think about the energy of whomever the witch was who allegedly owned it, it could be a very bad thing, particularly if that book was spelled or cursed itself. The book was said to move from day to day, but no one there at the site ever knew who was doing it. And once the ride opened, the book continued its travels of the attraction, again, with no one ever taking credit for the journey. That's pretty creepy. Back in the 1940s, it said that a man piloting a small plane crashed into a lake on the property where the theme park would eventually be built. And it said that the pilot, who unfortunately died in that crash, settled his spirit into the Haunted Mansion ride. Specifically, guys, I'm still sick. I'm doing the best I can with my voice. The spirit has appeared to many witnesses throughout the decades, and it's said that he appears as a shadowy man with a cane, and to this very day, people are still reporting seeing that same apparition on the Haunted Mansion ride. The main people who see it, though, are the staff, and it's usually while closing the ride down for the night. The shadowy pilot isn't the only phantom said to be roaming around that particular ride either, and many visitors have reported coming across the ghost of a very young little boy, and it's said that this spirit sits in the buggies next to the passengers when they're close to the exit, and he is always crying. This is a spirit that was named and come to be known as the Crying Boy. I looked into this a bit, and again, I just wanted to do a fun video and make this Halloween a bit more of a spook fest than any of the other years and just have some fun. But I did find what could be the reason the Crying Boy is attached to this particular ride. It's been rumored that a grieving mother took the ashes of her deceased young son to the Haunted Mansion ride, and she sprinkled his ashes surreptitiously all along the ride itself. Just so you guys know and are aware, it is actually illegal to bring ashes into Disney, and I'm sure even more illegal to dump them anywhere on the property. But from what I could find in my research for this video, it's actually really incredibly common for people to do this. Also, most spotted when passengers are exiting this particular ride is an apparition known as Tuxedo Man. The employee who first spotted this ghost said that she first spotted him when she was looking into one of the large mirrors set there at the end of the ride, so she and anyone else working the exit could make sure that everyone disembarked when they should, and no one stayed on the ride and tried to ride again without waiting in line or anything like that. She said that she saw the figure somewhat lurking inside the reflection of the mirror, and the figure would be seen in the mirror from time to time from there on out. Mostly it's just the staff who notice him, but some guests have claimed to have seen the Tuxedo Man as well. One former staff member said that the Tuxedo Man once exited the mirror and laid a hand on her shoulder from behind as she watched in horror through the mirror. That is so creepy. She ran from her post, quit her job the same day, and never ever returned to the park again. No one has any idea who this somewhat amorphous, very well dressed apparition could be, but it's said that he still lurks in that mirror to this day, and you could get a glimpse of him if you pay close attention to the mirror as you exit that particular ride. Aside from apparitions and spooks, there's also some legends about strange things having happened on this particular attraction. Still talking about the Haunted Mansion here, and one tale tells of a woman who happily got on the ride, but by the time she was supposed to exit it, she had suffered a massive heart attack and died right there in the buggy. Another account said that there was once a group of teenagers who were on the buggy ride, and they were a bit wild, as some teenagers can sometimes be, and they decided it would be a good idea to jump out of the buggy mid-ride in order to gain a better look at the same seance room. One of the kids somehow ended up tripping and breaking his neck because he hadn't realized that there was a drop between the platform and where the buggy's right on the rail, and he ended up falling 15 feet onto his head and into his own death. It's also rumored that when he was alive, Walt Disney did everything he could to cover up deaths that happened at the park in order to preserve the happiest place on earth reputation the theme park had and still has to this day. Think about it. You don't hear of many tragedies coming out of Disney theme parks, and we all know, if you watched or listened to my video about it, what happened to that one worker on the Disney cruise ship who randomly disappeared. They're still trying to keep it all so quiet, so believing this one didn't take too much of a stretch of my imagination. At the Haunted Mansion, staff to this day talk about having strange conversations with or just hearing disembodied voices. And they say there are disembodied hands that come out of nowhere to do strange things like untie hair ties or move props around when no one is looking. This is to the point that many workers refuse to even go near the ride, let alone have anything to do with running or operating it at all. Let's move on to the famous monorail that runs throughout the entire Disney theme park. This was envisioned to be the transportation of the future when this idea was first conceived, and the rail itself opened in the park in June of 1959. It's located in the Tomorrowland section of the park, and it was the first fully functional and fully operating monorail system in the United States, and some say in the Western Hemisphere at the time. It didn't quite take off as being used for transportation as Walt Disney himself had hoped, but it did become and still is one of the most beloved attractions of this particular theme park. One of the most famous tales of a haunting surrounding this well-known attraction is that of a young man who seems doomed to eternally roam around the monorail without ever being able to disembark them. The origins of this haunting can be traced back to 1966, when a 19-year-old kid by the name of Thomas Cleveland snuck into the park for an event being held by his school that year on grad night. For this event, the park was kept open all night long for the graduating class of that school for that year. So what I assume this is what we call a lock-in. This is by far the best lock-in idea I've ever heard of, but it's basically when your school holds an event on graduation night that's supposed to be more enticing and more fun than going out drinking or doing anything else that would be dangerous or something like that. I never attended any lock-ins for my school, but I do know that many schools still hold them for things like homecoming, graduations, and prom nights as well, all across the United States. If you aren't from America, please let me know if you have ever participated in a lock-in at your school. I'm just kind of curious. Anyway, young Thomas jumped the fence around the perimeter of the park and was standing on the track of the monorail. He was almost immediately seen by park security and warned to get down right away before he got himself hurt. The 19-year-old either wasn't listening on purpose or just didn't hear the warnings of the security guard, because he didn't move, and the monorail ran him over and ended up dragging him 40 feet along that same track. It finally came to rest after that, and it's said that his spirit still roams around the monorail track at night, and witnesses say he looks somewhat depressed but disappears the moment he realizes he's been noticed, thereby confusing the already terrified witnesses. He is also known to run alongside the train before vanishing completely as well, to really kind of amp up the spook factor of the haunting of that ride. Moving on to Space Mountain, and this one is said to be just loaded with all sorts of different entities that are seemingly there to terrorize and scare unsuspecting passengers and guests. Visitors and staff have both reported at least 2 ghosts haunting this ride, and there have been rogue reports of all different types of entities, as I said, other than these known too. One ghost is described as being a big and burly man who has red hair, a ruddy face, and he's known more for squeezing his giant body into the cars of passengers who are riding by themselves. When he initially embarks on the ride next to someone, he looks very much alive and perfectly normal, but then he just disappears in the middle of the ride, leaving the passenger confused and probably terrified, I'm sure. Space Mountain is in fact a roller coaster, and you will not catch me on any ride that leaves the ground, so I won't ever be able to go and see this one for myself, but there is an alleged history of who this man is and how he came to be haunting this very, very popular ride. It's said that he died of a heart attack in the 1970s, and he's been nicknamed Mr. One Way, which is a bit insensitive, but also kind of hilarious if you really think about it, and unless you're somehow related to him, it probably won't offend you. This specter isn't exclusive to the Space Mountain roller coaster, though, and many staff members throughout the years have reported also seeing him in the staff locker rooms as well, just roaming around and looking just as human as any of the other people there, except, of course, when he completely vanishes upon being spotted. While I understand the terror the average person would feel when experiencing these sorts of ghosts, I feel like, at least when dealing with the ones I've mentioned so far, I don't see anything particularly negative or dark about any of them. This guy in particular seems like he's just having a good time and enjoying his afterlife in the happiest place on earth, and he might just get a kick out of watching the humans be so fearful of him and his antics. The other ghost, always reported at Space Mountain, has been given the nickname Disco Debbie, and she's the glowing green apparition of a young woman. It's said that Debbie is the earthbound spirit of a former cast member. Cast member is what Disney calls their staff, and she died suddenly of an aneurysm while on the job one random day. She likes to ride the cars with or without passengers, appear in the middle of the track so it looks like the coaster is about to crash into an actual human being, and wander all around Space Mountain building and the area surrounding it. Tomorrowland allegedly houses the ghost of a teenager who died on the People Mover attraction in 1967. The People Mover attraction closed in 1995, but the ghost of this boy is said still to roam around the park, mainly in the area where the attraction was located. He likes to pull the hair of guests and cast members, specifically if they have blonde hair. There's another haunted roller coaster in Tomorrowland called the Matterhorn, and in 1984, a young woman named Dolly Young was said to have unbuckled her safety belt and stood up while in the middle of the ride. She's thought to have done this in order to help a small child who was seated in front of her, though there's no real information here about the exact incident or why she felt she had to take such a drastic measure to help the child in question. The bobsled she was sitting in entered a sharp dip just as she stood up, and this dip was underneath another track that spanned directly over it. Dolly was said to have been thrown by the sudden drop and then bashed her head against the other track, which sent her flying forward onto the track the bobsled she was in was on, and she landed right in front of where she had been sitting on the coaster in the first place. She was alive but unconscious when another bobsled came speeding towards her and ran right over her, which was what, unfortunately and somewhat tragically, killed her. It's said that her body was actually lodged into the track so tightly that the whole track had to be taken apart just to get her body out of it. This is a notorious incident, and the spot where she died is still referred to this day as Dolly's Dip. Dolly's ghost is seen all over the ride, but she is especially fond of calling out to other passengers in an area of the ride that's very open and cavernous. I'm not really sure exactly what she's saying to everyone, but one staff member said of Dolly haunting the Matterhorn, quote, "I worked on that ride for several years and I never saw her, but I sure did feel her. After the ride closes for the day, 2 people have to walk the track, one on each side of the mountain. You have to walk the ride starting at the bottom and working your way to the top. It is done to look for lost and found items. Every time I was unlucky enough to get a track walking shift, I had an uneasy feeling like someone was watching me. I was always convinced that it was Dolly, and so I would often say hi to her. The feeling was always the worst in the big cavern in the middle of the ride, and at Dolly's Dip, which is the spot where she died. In fact, the work lights in the tunnel near Dolly's Dip always seem to be burnt out. In 6 years, I don't think I ever saw those lights working. I hated running the track at the end of my shift, and I usually tried to get someone else to do it for me," end quote. Tomorrowland has to be the most haunted part of this particular theme park because our next alleged haunting also happens in the Tomorrowland area. From 1974 until 1988, there was an attraction here that was called America Sings, and this ride was located in a very unique looking circular building that rotated. This spot had housed a carousel before this ride was built there, and it was called the Carousel of Progress, whatever that means. America Sings was known as an innovative rotating carousel theater, and in it, various animatronic puppets would pop up and sing songs from throughout the history of the United States. It was somewhat like the Country Bear Jamboree many of us know and love today, but a little bit different. Disney opened this attraction when they did in order to celebrate America's bicentennial year in 1977. Tragedy struck almost immediately, too, when on July 8th, just 1 week after America Sings opened, an 18-year-old cast member working on the newest ride named Deborah Gale Stone was crushed to death by it. At approximately 10:35 p.m. that night, the teenager was fatally crushed between the rotating section of the ride where the audience members sat and the stationary stage where the animatronic puppets performed. No one saw what happened, and when some of the guests and other cast members heard Deborah's frantic screams, they thought it was part of the musical performance and didn't investigate any further. No one realized what had happened until approximately 25 minutes later at 11 p.m. when her body was discovered while the stage was being reset for the next show. This accident led to safety lights being put in and breakaway walls along with several other safety measures and mechanisms, but it was only closed very temporarily. From the night of the accident until the ride closed for good in 1988, cast members and guests alike have reported hearing the disembodied voice of a young woman telling them to be careful, and it's thought that the voice belongs to Deborah Stone. The cast members specifically reported that they would hear her voice shout these disembodied warnings when no one else was around, possibly ensuring that they heard her, unlike what happened when she screamed for help but no one heard or realized it way back when. Another ghost joins Deborah there, and it's said to be that of a young boy who was riding the People Mover ride and decided for some reason to jump from one car of the ride to another near the same building where Deborah was killed. A bit more ominous, this young man just lurks and scares people only to disappear as soon as he hears them scream. Let's finally move away from Tomorrowland and talk about one of the most popular rides that's also, I would be so bold to say, one of the most popular in the world, the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. This ride in particular has had so many macabre and strange tales surrounding it, and it's also one I've never been to but plan to go to one of these days. There's a lot of rumors surrounding this ride, and one of them, and it is just a rumor as far as I can tell for now, it's said that while designing the ride, in order to make it as realistic as possible, the creators and designers used real human bones in the construction of the ride. These bones were said to have been gotten from the UCLA Medical School, and they are used in the parts of the rides where there are somewhat evil and menacing looking skeletons hanging all around everything. It is said, though, that the real skeletons were eventually removed after having been on the ride for years, and that nowadays there are nothing but fake skeletons left. The one exception to this, according to some of the staff and other cast members, is the skull and crossbones used in a design on one of the walls, which is still very much made of real skeletal remains from some unknown and unnamed deceased human being or beings. Obviously, as well, there's the almost inevitable tales of people who allegedly spread their loved ones' ashes on the ride, and also of people dying on the ride, though there's nothing official that I could find. I will say, though, that Disney goes through great lengths in order for the public not to know too much about any tragedy that may strike the theme parks or cruise ships. So are there people who have died on the ride? I don't know, but it's certainly possible that there are. With all of these rumors, there's also one that this particular ride is haunted as well. The most well-known alleged ghost on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride is said to be that of a young boy who can be seen getting on the ride, and it's said that he isn't just seen by the naked eye of the human beings all around him, but also on the monitors. Like in those photos that amusement parks take when you're at the scariest part of the roller coaster or other ride, something like that, and you go quickly when you get off the ride to go look at like what your face looks like. I have the most hilarious picture of my mom on a roller coaster. Oh my gosh. But yeah, he's seen there too in the monitor and like people's pictures. But he's not like actually in the picture. He's like in the monitor, if that makes sense. So once the ride arrives back at its starting point, the boy is said to disappear into thin air, leaving everyone who saw him or who was otherwise aware of him very confused and probably scared. The little boy is said to be sweet and always smiling a happy smile and not terrifying or sad at all. There are other weird things said to be happening surrounding this ride as well. Puppets and props move on their own with no human involvement, and sounds like footsteps and disembodied breathing are heard all of the time, mainly by the maintenance and other after-hours crews in the park who come there once everything is closed down and everyone else has gone for the day. Some of these people are said to have seen the animatronic puppets and other props move on their own, and that seems to be the most terrifying thing about the alleged haunting of this ride. This is said to happen once the power is shut off, in the shadows of everything when the park and or the ride is at its darkest. That sounds absolutely terrifying to me. Do you know what an animatronic puppet is? Because if you don't, think that band at Chuck E. Cheese or like Freddy Fazbear's. They're animatronic puppets, I believe. The one ride that's the same in Disney World and Disneyland theme parks is the It's a Small World ride. And it's always creeped me out, despite my having to go on it so many times due to the fact that it was my stepfather's favorite ride when he was alive. And he would want to go on over and over again. And we would all just kind of humor him. Even people who don't believe in the paranormal agree that this ride is just plain creepy, even without all of the rumors that swirl around it. It's said that the lights turn on and off by themselves, but even more horrifying is the sound of teeny tiny footsteps and the laughter of children that can be heard at any given time by the workers. These cast members also say that they know they're being watched by someone or something in the shadows of the dark, even when they know for a fact that they're completely alone. Even when the power isn't on, it's said that some of the animatronic, creepy puppets suddenly come to life and start moving and singing that creepy song. Consider yourself lucky if you've never experienced this particular ride, haunted or not, in my opinion. There are more than a few ghosts said to be haunting Main Street, USA once the sun goes down. One ghost is that of a woman who is said to be wearing a long white flowing gown from sometime in the early 19th century, and she is said to guide children who are lost to where they're supposed to be, which is the Disneyland Baby Care Center. It's said she's someone who died on the land where the park was built long before the park ever existed, sometime in the early 19th century. The most well-known and seemingly the most obvious ghost in all of Disneyland is that of the creator of all of it, Walt Disney himself. Walt Disney kept an apartment over Main Street, USA, right over the fire station there. He used it as his residence while the park was being built, and during that time, he threw many lavish parties there. In order for people to know he was there and welcoming guests and company, he would leave a lamp lit in the window. So if he wasn't there or didn't want anyone to come over, he would leave the lamp in that particular window dark. But if he wanted company or was throwing a party, he would keep it burning in the one particular window. After he died in 1966, the staff decided to keep that same lamp burning in that same window as a way to honor his memory, and it said that sometimes it goes out on its own for no known reason. However, this isn't the start of this lamp being involved in some ghost stories surrounding the park. There's a reason they decided to keep it eternally lit. Not too long after Walt Disney passed away, a cleaning woman who was in the apartment saw that the lamp was lit, but she knew that no one could have been there or should have been there who could have been able to light it. This isn't an electric lamp, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's one of those like gas lamps that need to be lit with some sort of device like a match or a lighter, etc. She would turn the lamp off only to see when she turned around only seconds later that it had been lit/turned on again. She went and turned it off again, but this time it relit right in front of her face while she watched, and she was the only person in the apartment when all of this went down. Not too long after what happened to the cleaning lady, a cast member had a similar experience in that same apartment with that same lamp. The cast member was in the apartment for some reason or another and heard Walt's disembodied voice say, quote, "I am still here," end quote. This instance is why everyone involved made the collective decision to keep that one lamp eternally lit in the window of the apartment. It hasn't gone out ever since. The lamp still turns on and off seemingly at will and late at night when no one else is in the park. Some of the cast members and maintenance/cleaning crews say that they hear footsteps around them in the apartment when they know for a fact no one else is there at all. Last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about Tom Sawyer Island, which is another attraction of the park that's said to be very haunted. A shadowy figure or shape is said to dart all around the attraction and make ripples in the water where and when there should otherwise be none. Some people who work there think it's the ghost of a small boy who died there on the ride in 1973. The boy is said to have drowned after having somehow gotten stuck on the island with his brother. Once the park closed, he drowned when they tried to swim across the ride to safety. So while I wanted to keep this fun and everything, guys, I will say that this does not make any sense to me whatsoever because I am a parent and I know that if my children had gotten lost in the park, I wouldn't let it close until they were found or until every single nook, cranny, and inch of every single area and ride were searched for them. And I doubt very much if this ride or the park itself would have closed with two small children being lost somewhere inside it. But again, let's keep it fun and not so much real. I digress. There are more than a few shops in the park that are said to be haunted as well. It's really inescapable that almost anywhere you go, there's some sort of legend or lore involving some sort of haunting. And I honestly had no idea that Disneyland, of all places, is such a paranormal theme park. I can't wait to go to Disney World again. I really can't. So I will bring you all along with me, though. Don't worry about that. A shop called the Star Trader is said to be the home of a spirit that leaves roaming cold spots in its wake and who rearranges the items on the shelves and in storage after hours. And it's said that this has been caught on the surveillance footage several times. There's even said to be a haunted ice cream cart in Disneyland. A woman's disembodied voice is said to emanate from within and around this particular cart, though I couldn't find any more information about what she is allegedly saying or where the cart is located. There are ghosts, spirits, and all sorts of entities that randomly seem to roam all around any area of the park at any given time of the day or night. Walt Disney himself is said to walk all around this theme park all of the time, and he always has a smile on his face and a skip in his step, seemingly enjoying the magical world he created purely from his own imagination, where people go to escape the reality of their everyday life and just spend some quality time together. Even in death, or so it seems, he is still having the time of his life, enjoying his life's work. So Disneyland and Disney World theme parks are really exciting places to be. And like I said in the beginning, it's one of my most favorite places in the whole world. And it's almost impossible to have a bad time while you're there. However, it's also a place that's littered with rumors of all sorts of ghosts and entities that range from the macabre and terrifying to the joyous and happy. I only covered a teeny tiny amount of the less terrifying ones here today. There's a persistent undercurrent almost of strangeness and other about these places too. Like, for example, the aforementioned creepy It's a Small World ride, and so many others. If you're ever in Disneyland in California, just make sure you watch your surroundings very closely, especially if you have extrasensory abilities. I'm thinking about writing a book containing all of the interesting characters I've met in spirit throughout my lifetime, and there would be at least 3 that I could remember off the top of my head. 3 stories in there from my time at Disney World in Orlando, Florida. I can't wait to hear what you all think, and remember to send in your own encounters. Don't click off yet because there's important information and recognitions I'll be making in the next 3 to 4 minutes, so I'd appreciate it if you watch the video all the way through. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me. Spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe, please, if you haven't already. A lot of my repeat viewers aren't subscribed. So, I mean, we're already going together. Let's make this thing official. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure your notification bell is turned on, and make sure you go and check if you haven't in the very recent past, because if you check today, you could have your notification bell not on tomorrow. This video and most of what I do here on this channel is sponsored by my members: Ghost Dragon ZW, Wendy Williams, Nutslap, Val SWPA, Casey, Blue Crossroads, Hurricane Holly, Gary Reed, Slow Motion, Life with Bobby, Jared, Crazy Indian, Mama Cindy Lee, Chris Jarvis, Let the Monsters In with Ryan Tremblay, Kelly Lewis, Multifaceted Jules, The Batmom, Black Dragon, Diane Bosch, Alexander Unverhal, Cheeky Kiki, Divine Empathic Tarot, Vixen Doe, Heather B, Aunt Edna, and the Paranormal Pixie, in no particular order. Thank you so much to my members for being so incredibly supportive. If you're not a member, please go and consider possibly becoming one, especially if you are a regular if you regularly attend my Friday Live Intuitive Oracle, which I missed this past week because I was just so incredibly sick. Not to mention a scheduling conflict, but I could have made it work on Saturday. But guys, I still don't feel well. I'm doing this because I absolutely had to get it done for you guys, or this entire series was going to fail, and I couldn't bear the thought of that. So after this, I'm definitely laying down. Check out the description box for important links, ways to donate to the channel. Donation is how I get paid for the most part. PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link. All of the links, Kindle, paperback, and Audible, to all of my books will be in the description box. If you're looking for a particular link to a particular book and you can't find it, just go on Amazon and search Gemma Jade Books and you'll find my entire collection. Again, Kindle, paperback, and Audible. If you've ever purchased and read or listened to any of my books at all, please go to Amazon and leave a 5-star review and a positive written review. So if you rate a book, any amount of stars. You also have to leave a written review, but you can just leave like 2 words. Great book. Gemma's awesome. Like whatever it is, it really does help me sell more books, make more money, and keep my books more prominent on Amazon and more likely to be kind of recommended and pushed out. For any correspondence with me, for autographed copies of books, for spiritual helper boxes, to purchase anything that I make homemade and handcrafted, or to find out what those items are, because a lot of people don't know about the homemade stuff I make. And if you know about what I make, you do not know about all of it. Trust me, because I haven't even spoken about all of it. People that come to me for spiritual help through video calls, if you want information about that, like they mainly will know because I'll recommend something to them, right? If you want autographed copies of my book, I don't know if I said that already, for any correspondence at all, to purchase something, to set up a meeting with me or a reading, for general remote readings, anything at all, just send it all to GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Hit me up on TikTok, Instagram, and or Facebook. I will say I do not use Instagram, rarely, ever, if at all. I'm trying to get 1,000 followers on TikTok, so if you can hit me up over there and follow me, I would really appreciate it. I can do so much more over there and make so much more money right away if I can just get to that 1,000 followers. When I have 4, 5, 6, 7 days where I can't work because I'm sick or for whatever other reason, it really does slow down my progression in my channel because I can't put shorts out, which brings in the most views and the most subscribers. So I'd appreciate your help there. On Facebook, Gemma Jade. I'm sure there's a lot more, but I'm probably forgetting most of it. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. You are amazing. You are worthy. Abundance is your birthright. I believe in you. I got your back. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.